Washington needs a young receiver to step up.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Unfortunately, no Lars Hansen today. We're dealing with some technical issues. Hopefully, we'll get those sorted out in the very near future with so many more spring practices coming up on the horizon. Speaking of spring practices, make sure wherever you get this podcast, whether you're here with us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, anything like that, make sure you subscribe, click that follow button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. We're dropping so much content from spring practices, so make sure you leave a comment down below, like the video, go follow us on social media everywhere, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, at Locked On Huskies. Got a really fun show coming at all of you today. We're going to talk some recruiting notes. I want to dive into a couple guys that I'm really high on. Dominic Harris going to be coming up on an unofficial visit this weekend. We'll get there in a little bit. Talk about some of the biggest position battles outside of the offensive line that have been developing this spring. Lars and I had a really fun conversation about that on yesterday's show, so make sure you go check that out as well. But first, we're starting off with Washington's young wide receiver core. Now, this is something that Lars and I have talked about a lot over the course of this offseason, and personally, I've been keeping a very, very close eye on this entire group all spring long, because there's a lot of intrigue here, in my opinion, because there's so much talent, right? I want to run through all the names that I'm probably going to get into over the course of this. We're hoping to get to all of them. Justice Williams, Chris Lawson, Marcus Harris, Raiden Vines-Bright. Where in that group, we've got three true freshmen that all enrolled early, plus you got a redshirt freshman in Justice Williams, who I want to start there, because Justice Williams is a guy who, it's no secret, if you've been subscribed to this channel for a while, I have made it very, very clear that this is one guy who I absolutely love. 6'4", 210, dad played in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with the Raiders at tight end, so he's got the bloodlines, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism, he's got the background, all of those things. Now, I look at what outside receiver is going to look like for Washington this season. We know Denzel Boston is going to be that guy. We know Omari Evans has had a really nice start to the spring. I've been very, very impressed with what I've seen from him. Rasheed Williams is somebody who is widely expected to break out, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see him, maybe end up with the third most catches on this team by the end of the year. Just throwing that out there right now. But behind that, it's all about the depth, because at the end of this season, we're probably going to see Denzel Boston move on. I truly believe he could be the number one wide receiver selected in the 2026 NFL draft. That's a different conversation for a different day. Omari Evans will be out of eligibility. So the question is, hey, who else is going to step up? You got a couple of true freshmen waiting in the wings as well, where Deji Jose is a guy who looks like he could play outside. He's not here this spring, so Justice Williams has a major opportunity to prove himself. And I think that there's been a lot to like. There's still some things he needs to improve on. I saw on Tuesday he had a wide open ball in the end zone where, I can't remember who was playing quarterback, fit it right over the top of the defensive back, and Justice Williams dropped it in the end zone. It looked like he kind of thought the ball was going to get tipped and maybe read it wrong, so wasn't necessarily the best play for him, but we've seen a whole bunch of drops early on in spring as these quarterbacks and a lot of new wide receivers start to get their chemistry down, so it's not something to be concerned about on day 3, day 4 of spring practice, but he's a guy where the more I watch him, the more I look at him, the more I say, yeah, I could certainly see him playing a role this season, and probably in a limited capacity, similar to what we saw Rasheed Williams do last season. And then 2026, take a big step forward. So I want to throw that guy out there, because I really do believe that we're going to see him on the field more this season. And the more we see from him, the more you're going to like him, because you're going to see all those measurables and just say, yeah, this isn't a guy you can keep off the field for very long. But I want to move into the slot here, because Audric Harris is one guy who I totally just blanked out mentioning his name off the top. That's on me. Well, we're going to start with him, because he's somebody who has had some ups and downs. He's had a couple of drops this spring where, like I said, it's a chemistry thing at different points in time, where there was one on Tuesday where it looked like he looked over the wrong shoulder for a seam ball and then had to come back and still got both his hands on it, but wasn't able to pull it in. Looked like just a bit of a timing thing there. He's somebody who Jedd Fisch told us the other day is competing for a starting spot in the slot, where he's competing with Kodi Greene, Chris Lawson, Raiden Vines-Bright, and those are a whole bunch of guys who they're all very similar in terms of their physical profiles, in my opinion, where they're all, somewhere between 5'11" and 6 foot, 170 to 180 in terms of their weight, with all decent long speed. I think Raiden Vines-Bright would probably claim the fastest among that group. But I look at Audric and I say, this is a guy who the staff clearly really likes what he brings to the table, because they burned his red shirt last season. And you look at the numbers, I believe it's 2 catches for 13 yards. The numbers don't necessarily reflect somebody who needed to have their red shirt burned. So it tells you, hey, there's something here with this guy that they really, really like, that whether it be Jedd Fisch, Kevin Cummings, Jimmy Doherty, that there's a lot of promise there with that guy. And the more I watch Audric Harris, the more I say, okay, I see some of those things, the athleticism, the feet, the measurables, and I'm still kind of waiting for him to take a big step forward this spring. We haven't seen where, I mean, I think back to, it's an extreme example, of course, but Rome Odunze in 2022 and 2023 were more so 2022, where there were just practices where it didn't matter who was lined up across from him, whether it be 1s, 7s, or 11s, you knew the ball was going his way and you knew he was going to win. Now, we haven't seen that really from any guy outside of Omari Evans so far this spring, but again, it's still early and there's a lot of time for these guys to develop and just continue to, again, build that chemistry and figure out their role. And I think Audric is the primary candidate to do that. I like where Kevin Greene was in that role last year, but as a guy who, you know, has been around this team now for a year, built some chemistry with Damon Williams last year, I excluded him from just this exercise. So with that being said, I want to move into some of these true freshmen, and I want to start with Chris Lawson, because we talked about Chris Lawson a little bit the other day as somebody who really impressed on Saturday in the first padded practice, and I asked Jedd Fisch about those guys on Tuesday, and he lumped them all into a bucket and said, I've been impressed with their physical abilities. It's not so much, hey, can they catch the ball? Can they hang at this level? It's, what is the mental side of all this going to look like? Are you going to block well? Are you going to be able to pick up the playbook? Are you going to be able to understand the motions and pick up the motions on time and do those things in rhythm the way that they need in a pro-style offense like Jedd's is? As Jonah Coleman told us on Tuesday, it's run by, or some variation of that offense is run by 19 teams around the NFL. So that certainly can be tough for guys who are early enrollees out of high school to pick up. But I like where Chris Lawson stands in that case right now. We saw Raiden Vines-Bright practice for a little while on Tuesday, and he left early. But this is a guy who I wouldn't be surprised if of all 5 of these true freshmen coming in, that Raiden Vines-Bright is the one who burns his red shirt, because of his makeup being a whole lot like Audric Harris, where he's a little bit thicker in terms of his build, which is nice to see from somebody who's listed at 6 foot, 185, 190, I want to say is where he's listed right now. And he has that field stretching speed where if you want to put him on the outside, you can. But if you also want to use him in the slot, and you can, he just brings a different variation of the offense. I think he's been the most consistent so far this spring. He made a nice play on Saturday on a fade route to the back left corner of the end zone where he made a nice catch from Damon Williams. And again, he left Tuesday's practice with injury. It doesn't sound like it's anything serious, and he's supposed to end up being back on Thursday. So I just look at a guy like that and I say, whether he is getting some first-team reps over the course of the spring, he's somebody I really do believe has a great opportunity to step up and become a very big part of this offense, where maybe it is getting 15, 20 snaps a game and you call that a big part. But, you know, when you've got Denzel Boston and Omari Evans and Rasheed Williams, we know what Jedd Fisch's target breakup usually looks like, where you look at back at his time at Arizona, and even last year at Washington, where there are 2 guys that get the majority of the targets, and then there's a big gap between number 2 and number 3. So if he, you know, still ends up playing, let's just call it 150 snaps this season, but only sees 7 or 8 catches, that's not going to be a shock for a true freshman. But just getting a guy like that on the field is very promising. And you can say the same thing about Marcus Harris, where he's also dealt with a couple of timing drops so far this spring. And it's something where, you know, again, I haven't even seen him work with Dash Byerly that much, his high school quarterback at Mater Dei. So it's something where he's still figuring out the college level, and not in terms of physicality, in terms of timing. So these are all things where one of these guys is going to have to step up. That's the point I wanted to make sure I made. And I wanted to list out what I've seen from all of them so far. One of these guys is going to have to step up for Damon Williams this spring, or not even just the spring, this fall, because that's what Washington's offense needs. There is depth, there is talent at the receiver position, but somebody needs to not only step up and win the slot battle, which in my opinion right now would be Kevin Greene, but somebody needs to back him up, because depth at receiver with just what kind of talent this receiving core has and this offense as a whole has is going to be vital for Damon in 2025. But let's jump into some of these other position battles. Right after message from our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel has given new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, and you know I'm picking my favorite team in the NBA playoffs. I've got the Celtics going back-to-back. I would absolutely love to see it. Give me Jason Tatum as the finals MVP. He absolutely deserves it. He's had a stellar season so far. Would love to see them make another deep run. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. So as we dive into some of these position battles, I feel that the only proper place to start with this team is along the defensive line, where we've kind of talked about the outside linebacker, edge rusher position a little bit, and I think that's going to be somewhat set when Zach Durfee comes back, where Zach Durfee's going to end up on one side, and then on the other, it's going to depend on the team a little bit, where Tatayu Uiagalelei might end up taking some snaps out there, and he might move inside at different points in time. So I want to focus a lot on the interior of the defensive line because I kind of eliminated him from this exercise. I was doing some prep work on it, and I feel that Anterio Thompson has a spot locked down. Whether I don't think it'll end up being at that zero, at that nose technique. He'll have one of the other sides as a 4-eye, 5 technique sort of guy on one side of the field where he can work mainly against a guard, where he's shown early on in spring practice that he is very, very good in those roles. He's so just powerful. He's got the twitch, the athleticism that you're looking for up front. And, even if he was at Western Michigan last season, it's very clear why the coaching staff prioritized him so early on. And he was one of the first commits. He has everything that you're looking for from the defensive tackle spot. And then a lot of this is going to depend on Jayvon Parker's health, where I look at coming off a torn Achilles, he'd be 11 months out by the time the start of the season rolls around. I don't think he's going to start week 1. If he's in the rotation, that is an awesome win for this coaching staff, for the medical staff, and for Jayvon, because he's such a talented player. He adds so much to this defensive line. And if he's able to start, wow, huge win. That's awesome. I can't count on that at this point in time because we haven't seen that this spring. So I look at that other starting spot right now and just at that other 4 or 5 technique, whatever you want to say, wherever they're going to line up the most. And I think Elinneus Davis is the favorite to win that spot right now, because I look at some of these other guys and I say Bryce Butler is going to be really nice as a pass rusher late in third down and long, that sort of role, because he is so good at shooting gaps and he is so good with that first step at finding ways to win with speed. And he doesn't necessarily collapse the pocket from the interior with great power, but he finds ways to move players off their spot. Whether it be running backs early on last season when he was able to just get upfield against the run really quickly. I think he had a couple of pressures early on. He just didn't get a ton of snaps. So I don't have that just, front and center in my mind without watching a whole bunch of tape. But I look at Bryce Butler and I say, that's going to be a really nice rotational player. And then I look at the nose tackle position and I say, that's going to be mainly Simote Pepa or Logan Sagapolu. And I think when Simote Pepa is healthy, he's going to be the guy that wins that role. Again, he's missed 2 practices already this spring. Recovering from a minor injury, doesn't look like it was anything too severe. And the fact that he was able to come back after a little bit under a week on the sidelines seems like a really good sign. And maybe they're just taking it slow with some stuff that he was dealing with from last season at Utah. So just some stuff to keep an eye on there. And somebody who I noted was playing nose tackle on yesterday's show was Omar Khan. I think that Omar Khan and Elinneus Davis might be a little bit more of a battle than some people think, because we haven't necessarily seen them taking reps from one another so far this spring. But I just look at this defensive line and I look at what Omar Khan brings to the table. It's a little bit different. We saw Elinneus Davis really develop as a pass rusher in various stints last season. So I think that he could have a nice role there, but he is also that big physical body that you like against the run. But then again, we haven't seen Omar Khan play against Big Ten competition yet. He redshirted last season and is somebody who has the high floor that you're looking for. Even as, a mid 3-star recruit in Texas, he was somebody who was a state champion down there, racked up, I want to say it was 25 offers by the time he signed with Washington. So he's got that acumen that you're looking for. Plus, again, the physicality of being a state champion wrestler in the state of Texas is nothing to sneeze at. So I combine those things and I say, and with what we've seen early at practice too, where he's worked with the first team defensive line against Landon Hatchett and held his own. And I say, this is a guy who absolutely should be considered for, at the very least, a spot in the rotation along the defensive line, which, if I were looking at this from a 5,000 foot view right now and saying, I don't know what this defensive line looks like because not a lot of these guys have experience at the college level, or, the ones that do are coming off of injuries or have played limited reps before, I wouldn't have that many concerns about it because it's what we didn't see last year. I know I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again because it is that important of a point. We did not see this kind of depth along the defensive line last season, where you hoped that Jayvon Parker was going to be able to bring a whole bunch. And when he was healthy, he was excellent. He showed what kind of development this coaching staff has been able to help him with over the course of the 2024 season. And then he tore his Achilles, which was a major bummer. We saw his twin brother Armand tear his ACL. And now it looks like he's on track to hopefully be ready for the start of the season. We've seen him working out a little bit so far this spring, which is a great sign and just adds to that point. It's extra depth, which is just so necessary for this team for where they are right now. I'm not factoring in the true freshmen into this equation just yet. I feel like those guys are players who are very talented. I'm talking about Caleb Smith, Dominic Macon, as guys who are very talented, have high upside, but probably need to redshirt right now just based on where the depth is and where a lot of these guys are going to be after the season, where Logan Sagapolu's out of eligibility. Simone Pepa's out of eligibility, as is Taitai Uyunglele. There's one or two other guys that I believe might be moving on after the season. So you want to see what you have with this deep rotation of guys. And you have that. I believe that Omar Khan is somebody who, along with Elinneus Davis, are going to provide necessary depth. And whoever wins that battle is going to be a key contributor this season, even if it might not show up on the stat sheet. And with that being said, I want to move back to the nickel position because it's something I wrote about over on Huskies Wire. Lars and I have talked a lot about Rashawn Clark over the course of this week, and I was going back and listening to some of the comments Jedd Fisch made about the position during his Tuesday press conference, and he said that is so big for our defense, that nickel position, and Leroy Bryant has sort of joined that competition as well. And I don't think that's because he got pushed off the outside, but it's because he's such a good athlete that you might as well try to find a way to use him at whatever spot possible, like the conversation Lars and I had about Rashawn Clark, who has certainly taken the lead in that battle, in my opinion. So keep an eye on Leroy Bryant there over the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure how that's necessarily going to develop for him. I think he's going to end up outside and kind of be in that CB3, CB4 sort of role this season, with Dylan Robinson coming in, where he was around for all the practices last week. And I was saying to our buddy Nick Lemkow over at Last Word on College Sports, just look at the size difference between Tacario Davis, Ephesians Prysock, and Dylan Robinson is not nearly as big as some people think it might be, where even listed at 6'3", 195, you don't realize just how just big and physically ready he looks for the college level without seeing him stand next to those guys. And being on a visit last week, he's early enrolled, I believe he's on spring break or something. You see, okay, I understand why they're very high on this guy outside of just the tape. He physically looks ready, like he's going to be able to compete this season, which is very tough for Leroy Bryant, Caleb Presley, Darian Clemens, everybody else in that room. But it's just nice depth of position, so you have to find a way to utilize Leroy Bryant alongside Dyson McCutcheon as those three kind of become the rotation at nickel. And I'm very curious to see what that's going to look like. I believe that Rashawn Clark is going to start at that position, but it's an abundance of wealth, right? Something you still did not have last season. The last thing I want to talk about is just the way this tight end battle is shaping up, where I say battle somewhat loosely in this sense, where I just knew I wanted to talk about one spot on the offense as well, because we know what running back looks like. Talked about a receiver for a while, talked about offensive line a lot yesterday. So I said, I want to talk about tight end here. And we know Quinten Moore is going to end up being the starter. Throughout the course of his career, he hasn't necessarily been relied on very often as a pass catcher through no fault of his own. He's just been around, whether it be Kade and Devin Culp for a little while. And we saw Josh Cuevas come in and take some reps in 2023 as well. And then last season, he looked like he was going to step into that role, and then he got hurt. So not through any fault of his own on that illegal play or anything. We've seen him have some ups and downs this spring as he continues to recover from the knee injury. But the more I look at that position, the more I say, I think that the battle might be between Quinten Moore and Cade Eldridge as to who the better blocker is. And I think Quinten Moore certainly has the upper hand there right now, where he has been one of the best blocking tight ends in college football for a while. Not just in terms of PFF grades, but if you go and you watch him, just watch how physical he is. You see, oh yeah, this is a guy who can get downhill in a hurry, is very strong, knows where to place his hands, and is very good at just standing up players who were even 15, 20 pounds heavier than him. So I look at Kade Eldridge and I say, there's still some development left there, but this coaching staff has been giving him a lot of reps with the first team so far this spring for that reason. For, hey, if something does happen, we're going to need somebody to do that. And Decker DeGraff is not the kind of guy who, and, you know, it's no slight at Decker. You watch that guy play, and he is such an athletic tight end who can move all over the formation and do a whole lot for you as a receiver. That is, hey, we don't want to put that guy in line right now and have him be the primary blocking tight end, because that's not where his skill set is best utilized. And I think that they kind of see that for Kade Eldridge, where he can be a little bit more of a do-it-all tight end in that regard of he can be a better blocker. So that's something that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on over the next few weeks, because I believe that Quinten Moore is going to end up winning that battle. But Kade Eldridge, with the development skills of Jordan Paopao, who we've seen at Washington for a number of years, put tight end after tight end after tight end in the NFL, is something that could be very important. And especially when Quinten Moore moves on after the season, just could be beneficial to the depth down the line as well. But with that being said, we got to talk some recruiting. As we jump on over to the recruiting trail, it's not that there's a whole bunch of news. I just wanted to take some time and break down a couple prospects that I'm really, really interested in this 2026 cycle for Washington. And I have to start right off the top with 3-star offensive tackle Dominic Harris. I've made no secret that I'm a huge fan of just what kind of just high-end potential this guy has at 6'8" and 348 pounds. Like I'm so enamored by that. He's going to be coming up to an unofficial visit this weekend. I don't think he's been on campus since Brendan Carroll left for the Raiders and Michael Switzer has taken over as the offensive line coach. So it'll be nice for him to get a chance to build a relationship with him in person a little bit more closely. And that's critical for somebody who is very, very high on Washington, because Brendan Carroll was the first guy to offer him. And we've seen Jedd Fisch from this coaching staff take a major interest, as we talked about on yesterday's show, with guys like Champ Talialia and John Mills, especially in some of these big-bodied, ready-to-play early sort of guys, because I don't necessarily know if Dominic Harris fits the second part of that mold, but I mean, I'm not going to run through his size again, because it's very obvious how big and promising that kind of frame can be at the college level, especially with a year or two of development behind, you know, whoever it ends up being a tackle for Washington, right? Whether it's Jerez Party, Maximus McCree, John Mills, Jack Schaefer is another guy thrown in that boat, Justin Hilkema. Getting another big talented body like that is such just a crucial part of success in the Big Ten. And I look at just the other schools recruiting him, whether, you know, it'd be Auburn, Arizona, Utah being the other ones standing out as in terms of he's got official visits set up there. And I say, I think Washington has a really good shot here. And on top of that, I think they've got a decent shot with Kodi Greene, where it's 5-star offensive tackle who's committed to Oregon. And I don't just say that because Caden Greene, his older brother, is a walk-on safety for the Huskies. I say that because I think whatever is going on at Oregon in terms of that recruiting class and how it's kind of fallen apart in front of them is a big part of why he's just taking a looking around, where he's got visits set up with USC, with Texas as well, and then he'll be coming up to Washington next Saturday, according to On3 on April 18th. And I just like where they sit in this recruitment, where I say that to play off of Dominic Harris, because we saw with their pursuit of Kenny Pepe, which obviously has been since proven to be futile, along with other guys like Sam Utu, that they want one of these big high-end offensive tackles who is projected to get on the field early. Where I think about the futile recruitment that was Josh Connerly a few years ago and how he started right away as a freshman at Oregon, where I know there are some people who disagree with the freshmen starting early, especially on the offensive line. But in this day and age, that's something where it's not even an NIL thing, right? It's you want to put your best players on the field. And even if you believe that is a true freshman who has certainly gotten better work in, where he's able to go down to Mater Dei and play in the Trinity League, if you're able to sell him on, you know, whatever that might be, I know I just listed off all those tackles. They're all developmental guys who if if Kodi Greene is able to come in and just say, yeah, I'm at a similar point in my development. I have just as much upside as an athlete. Why not throw me out there and see what happens? I think this coaching staff is more than willing to do that. I don't just say that because that's my opinion. It's because it's what they've done with Jonas Salvanaya, with Wendell Moy, with Jordan Morgan as well. I almost forgot his name there. I can't ever forget the name of the first round pick. That'd be just criminal in my opinion. But they've shown to do that time and time and time again. And with a 5-star tackle of that caliber, it would certainly fall into that boat. So I think that that's something that they're going to be selling very heavily, along with obviously being a former Eastside Catholic guy, the ability to come home, play in front of his family, are all just critical pieces of this recruitment that I think could land them in a decent spot, especially if they can pick up an official visit. We'll see how that schedule sort of shapes up for him whenever he decides to release it. But I think that the offensive line is certainly a curious one to keep an eye on. I'm a big fan of Aaron Thomas, the 3-star offensive lineman out of Arizona, who's got an official visit set for the end of this month. So Washington is in a lot of promising offensive linemen. Now the question is closing, where we see it all the time, right? It's, Washington's in on this, top 50, top 100 prospect. You weren't able to seal the deal here. You weren't able to seal the deal there. So that's something where in 2026, with what we've seen this coaching staff be able to do in the transfer portal, where they invested huge to get Carver Willis, to get Taitayu Angalale, to get Anterio Davis, where, obviously the connection with those two guys, the last two guys there being from Arizona, is important, but it's not everything, because we saw, I just said his name, Wendell Moy. We saw him be interested in Washington and not even come up for a visit because Tennessee just said, what's it going to take? So just stuff to keep an eye on there. And I want to just kind of jump around here, where this defensive back class is shaping up in a really interesting light, where I talked about Bo and Nico Jandro the other day with Lars. I want to talk about Jeron Jones today, where he's somebody who certainly got a little bit overshadowed at Mission Viejo. When you're playing behind Dijon Lee, it's not going to do anybody any favors because of just the literal shadow that a player of that size and caliber can cast. And I think Jeron Jones, who recently got upgraded to a 4-star by Rivals, is somebody that is very well could end up at Washington. Feels like it's a UW versus USC battle, as USC looks to take, 100 players in their high school recruiting class at this point in time. I know they're already up to 21, which is absolutely wild. But I think with the way Washington's recruiting class has gone so far, you got a couple of versatile guys, one in Kasani Giles, who's probably going to end up playing in that nickel role a little bit, with CJ Lavender, who told us on the show after he committed that he's going to end up at safety, and Elijah Durr at corner. You need one more corner and one more safety, especially if you just kind of look at what John Richardson wants to do with this class. So Jeron Jones certainly looks like he could be that other corner. I'm interested to see how his recruitment plays out again, but I like the size, I like the physicality, and I think it's something where you look at that frame and you don't need to necessarily throw him into the fire right away. With some of the guys you have in front of him, you can take a year, 2 years, and put some weight on him, put some strength on him, because he's very aggressive at the line of scrimmage and he knows how to use his hands very well. But it's something where in this conference in the Big Ten, he's got to continue to grow into his frame and add more size to be able to come downhill and play and run support. And it's not that he's not willing, it's that he needs to be able to have the adequate size to do that. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out for him. And as I continue to look at this, I wanted to answer a question, or kind of answer, because it baffles me too, that we got the other day for him. We put up one of our little clips from the show talking about Luc Weaver, who, shout out to my hometown of Sherman Oaks, California, plays down at Notre Dame over there. And someone in the comments said, he's 6'4", 210, runs as well as he does. How is USC not all over this guy? Hey, I wish I had an answer for that, because you look at that film and this is somebody who is just so impressive physically. He's got so much burst. He's got great hands, great ability to run after the catch. And I just think he is such a perfect fit for Washington's offense, where I look at what Kevin Cummings has been able to do with some of the guys in his room over his time at Arizona and now here at Washington. And I just say, I think Luc Weaver is that perfect fit, where I look at what Deji Jose does from the 2025 class, just to, bring this full circle, right? Where I look at Deji Jose in the 2025 class and I see a big physical guy who can go up and get it. And he is really athletic, right? He played safety at Bishop O'Dowd. He played a little bit of linebacker. So it's not that he can't move, but it's Luc Weaver is just a different level of athlete at that same size, where you can have those two guys play on the outside for you and complement each other very well, where one of them is a big physical, I'm going to go up and win the ball, type of receiver in Deji Jose. And then Luc Weaver is a guy on the other side of the field who you can certainly teach to do that. I don't think he's bad at that per se right now, but with his athleticism and his ability to stretch the field and run a very impressive route tree for his age is something where, again, to why I want to bring this full circle, if that's somebody you want to play early on because of that athleticism, because of that promise that he shows you on film right now, I don't think anybody should be opposed to that in this day and age of playing more and more players early on and burning their red shirts. And he's just that kind of guy where I look at this receiver class, you're not taking 5 guys again. We just saw you do that last year. So you can be a little bit more selective, I want to say, with your takes. And obviously Terrence Sarian is a guy you want to take where he fits that mold of somebody of Audric Harris who can run really well out of the slot and you can coach up and you don't need to put on the field right away. And this is, in terms of athleticism, very similar, but in terms of body type, the exact antithesis, right, of somebody who's 5'10", 170 when you're 6'4", 210. So I like the way those guys complement each other, and then you can find a way to bring in one more receiver. There are a whole bunch of other names out there. I don't necessarily want to get into those right now because we're about to wrap up here, but I look at Luc Weaver and I say to fans who are, turned off by star rankings where they say, oh, this guy's a 3-star receiver. Oh, well, you took 4 3-stars last year. Why are you doing this again? I highly implore you to go watch the tape and just watch the way some of these guys move, because this is the note I want to end on. For anybody who will be down on recruiting rankings and down on, oh, well, this player's a 3-star, that player's a 3-star, I highly recommend going and watching the huddle of some of these players, and don't go into it just thinking about their star ranking. Go into it thinking about their athleticism and the way they move, because it's not about the competition. It's about the player. And if you see somebody who, for one reason or another, is head and shoulders above the other players, whether it's physically, whether it's athletically, whether it's just one particular skill where they're very technically sound at a certain thing, those are the things college coaches look for. And Luc Weaver checks multiple boxes in that regard, which is why he's become such a big target of Kevin Cummings. Thank you so much to all the Everydayers tuning in. I really do appreciate your support, especially during these solo episodes. These can be a little tough for me, so I appreciate you bearing with me. I really hope you enjoyed all the content. If you did, please leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below. Let me know some of the recruits in the 26 class that you're really interested in, who might be flying a little bit under the radar right now. And until next time, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. And again, please make sure to subscribe. Click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Like the video. Leave us a comment down below. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.